Hey guys, thank you for joining me for another video. Today we're going to talk about type 8, and we're going to talk about the paths of integration or disintegration, the high and low, what 8s look like under stress, what they look like in their health, and kind of what that journey looks like for an 8. So if you are an 8, thank you for joining me for this video. I hope this is helpful to you and encouraging to you, helps you observe better your behaviors so that you can get a handle on it and, continue to move toward health. For you guys that are friends with 8s or live with 8s, this will help you, I hope, understand and be more compassionate and be able to sense, where that person is at any given time in terms of their stress level. As you guys know, I do have a daughter. My wife and I have a daughter that's an 8, and so I've been able to see up close and personal what I'm talking about. And I think 8s, sometimes get a bad rap because they can be very forceful, very challenging. They are called the challenger type people who are somewhat no-nonsense people that can be direct and bold and straightforward. And sometimes they get a bad or a harsh rap by others, and sometimes even by themselves. They often come across toward others kind of in an intimidating way, and a lot of times 8s are not sure as to why that is. They don't necessarily mean to come across that way. They're just being themselves, and they get accused of steamrolling people, or being too dominant, or being too loud or domineering or authoritative, all those kinds of things. And often 8s are unaware as to why, others make, and they kind of get an attitude like, well, that's your problem, I don't care, because they're not necessarily understanding why they get labeled that way, when they just think their actions are they're just being themselves. So I want to unpack that a little bit today. 8s are, called the challengers. And through this series of videos, and we talk about paths of integration and high and low side and all that, I've been using an illustration of like the cabin in the woods. And so for the 8, their cabin in the woods is got a big 8 over it. And it's all those things that 8s are, direct, straightforward, a sense of, protection and need to protect. And really the kind of like the sense of like they need to protect themselves from anything that seems vulnerable or weak. And so they essentially just kind of shut that part of their personality down because they don't like feeling anything that makes them feel small or insignificant or weak. And so they kind of go to sleep to that, and they think of themselves as bold and strong and competent and able. And then they project that and they move to action first. They go to action first, and then maybe later then think about those actions. But they often end up in leadership positions or take leadership roles because they're not afraid to trust their gut instincts and step out and take action. So their cabin, is cabin 8, and they have neighbors on either side of them. Down the path on one side they have type 7, so they've got the 7 cabin neighbor that they can borrow from when they have a need, or when they're under stress. And 7 neighbor can be really helpful to the 8. There's a lot of things about the 7 that could benefit the 8. For example, when 8s kind of feel awkward and they are surrounded by people and they would rather not socialize, maybe they would rather disconnect, maybe they'd rather be blunt and straightforward and tell you this party's lame and they don't like you. They can borrow some of that lightheartedness from that 7 neighbor and, maybe, force themselves to be more congenial. 7s tend to want to get along with people and are often called the life of the party, And so 8s can lean on that 7 and be a little more lighthearted, take themselves a little less serious, be a little more congenial with others, focus on having a good time and, relaxing and having fun. And so I think the 7 wing could help, 8s if they'll learn to lean on that a little bit. a little more extroverted, become a little more extroverted when they need to, when they're under stress. And then down on the other, and by the way, I mentioned in my 7 video, 7s are the types that refuse to grow up, like think Peter Pan and Robin Williams and, big kids at heart. 8s, on the other hand, often feel like they had to grow up too soon, like they had to grow up at an early age. They had to grow up and take responsibility. And so, that juxtaposition of those two numbers, those two types right next to each other, kind of gives you an idea as to when an 8 might need to lean on 7. In those times when they need to relax a little bit, when they need to just loosen up and have a good time and not be so uptight, that inner child might be, needed and called on at times to sort of help them deal with life. Down the other end, the other side is cabin 9. And the 9 neighbors are really good for the 8s as well. If the 8s could learn to go down there and knock on the door when they have a need and borrow from that neighbor, they could really be benefited. The 9 is the peacemaker. The 9, doesn't take themselves that serious, focuses attention on others' dreams, others' wants. What other people have to say and what other people want is more important than what I have to say and what I want. And, that is, again, in direct opposition to the way an 8 thinks. 8s, remember the sin of the 8 is lust. And essentially at the root of what lust is what I want matters and what other people want doesn't matter. Other people and other things exist for my use. That's what lust is all about. It says, hey, I see that, there's my sister's hairbrush there, and if I want it and it's laying there, I can reach down and I can take it and I can use it. If, my sister has a dress in her closet that I want and she's not here to ask, well, it's there for me to use. And, an 8 will just go in there and take that dress or that outfit and wear it. And, they'll feel like if you have a problem with that, then you need to speak up for yourself. And if you don't, that's on you. And at the same time, the 8 might not realize or might not see the inconsistency, that if you were to go into the 8's room and take their stuff without asking, they're probably liable to lose their mind. They'd be very upset if somebody came in and started manhandling and rummaging through and rifling through all their stuff and touching it and using it. So the 8 sometimes doesn't see that, inconsistency. When other people act, in ways like that, then they're being incompetent, they're being intrusive. When the 8 acts like that, they just feel like it's justified. And so they may not see, that inconsistency. So that 9 neighbor, what does it do for the 8? Well, it tells them, maybe you don't need to make everything a big deal. Maybe you can just, relax and not worry about it. And maybe you can calm down and take other people's point of view more seriously. The 9 sees everybody's point of view and identifies with everybody's point of view. An 8 often doesn't see anybody's point of view except their own. Everybody else's point of view is what's the word I'm thinking of? Everybody else's point of view is incompetent, uninformed, and stupid. And, an 8 could lean on that 9 a little bit and say, other people do have reasons for doing what they do, and they ought to be heard. And maybe I could not take myself so seriously. So both of these, cabins on either side of you, I've said it before in the other videos, is if we could all learn to lean, in a balanced way on both of our wings, we would be much healthier types. That's a great place to begin, and I'm going to make some videos about a little bit more detail about the wings of each type. But learning to balance on those neighbors and to borrow from those neighbors can really help you be a more balanced person. It's true for 8s, it's true for all of us. Now, at the bottom of the hill, your cabin sits right there on the middle of the hill. At the very bottom of the hill is your outhouse. And that's where you go in times of stress. That's where you go when you need to relieve yourself, you need to find relief. And for the 8, that is number 5. That is got a big 5 on the top of the outhouse. And it's the worst or most unpleasant characteristics of the 5. And it's there for a reason. There are times when 8s get overwhelmed and stressed and upset. and they need to find relief, and they often find relief in ways that look like, or ways that are similar to, an unhealthy, aspects of Enneagram Type 5. So, and then at the top of the hill, and we'll talk about that 5 thing in a second, but at the top of the hill is their fruit trees, is their orchard. So you go back up to your cabin in health, and then and there are those rare times, where you go to the very top of the hill, where the fruit trees are, where the orchard is, and you pick from the fruit of, in this case for the 8, is the best of Enneagram Type 2, which is the caregiver, or the helper, or the pleaser. And you can see 8s soften up and really become tender, gentle, warm, protective caregivers. Okay, so let's go back down to the very bottom of the hill to where the outhouse is and talk about what an 8 looks like in their unhealth. Well, 8s are direct, bold, straightforward. You're going to see them be more of that. On their way down that hill to that 5 outhouse, you're going to see 8s become more harsh, more loud, more direct, more hurtful, more straightforward in their words and in their action. And often they'll go to action first, and they might, regret some of the actions they take or words they say in that burst of the moment, or in that, moment of anger and frustration. 8s can become, intolerant of other people. They can look at all people as being, incapable and incompetent. Remember, the 8 has a fortress mentality, that the people on the inside of the fort matter, and then everybody who's on the outside of the fort are just nameless settlers, and some of them are even hostiles. And as long as they stay on the outside of the fort, then we don't have a problem. But when they come banging in on the walls of the fort, the 8's going to get frustrated. And so, at their best, 8s can sometimes look at the people of this world as being nameless, faceless settlers, nameless, faceless robots. Now, that's not true of the people on the inside of their castle. The people they've chosen, to care for and to protect, they will give their life to protect, okay? So they absolutely will live and die for the people on the inside of their fort. But everybody that's on the outside of the fort either doesn't matter, or has been identified as someone to be avoided, or somebody to be protected against. So if you tend to look at people as nameless, faceless robots, then in your times of anger and frustration, you can see why an 8 would tend to look at people as being incompetent, incapable, in the way, frustrated and frustrating. 8s can, become hostile at people they don't think are following the rules. When they're under stress, they can be very agitated and point out all of the flaws as to why somebody's not following the rules. But again, they're inconsistent in this because they themselves don't feel a compulsion to follow the rules. 8s and 4s, by and large, tend to think that they're above the law. For 4s, the law is for ordinary people, and 4s are not ordinary people. And the 8s, the laws are for people that, follow laws. But the 8 is very sure of themselves. They're very confident of themselves. And if the rules and the guidelines and the laws don't make sense to them, they're not going to feel compelled to follow them. And so they'll point out how other people are not following the laws, but they themselves don't feel a compulsion to follow the rules often themselves. Not in every case, I'm sure, but by and large. So they may want to take vengeance out or revenge on those that they feel have wronged them. Now think like the 1 often wants to broadcast, fairness policies out for everybody. If everybody does this and everybody behaves this way, then the world will be a fairer place. 8s don't really want to broadcast out for other people to follow a bunch of rules, and they certainly don't want to manage people, and organize people and all that nonsense, which is nonsense to 8s. 8s are more likely to be more reactive in that somebody, stepped over my line, trespassed in my yard, borrowed, took, helped themselves, absconded with, however they want to say it, And now that person needs retributive justice. They need vengeance. They need to be responded to. Because why? It's all about protection. It's all about, I can't be in touch with anything in myself that feels weak or vulnerable. And if somebody got the better of me, then I was vulnerable and I was weak. And I'm not going to be weak and vulnerable. So that person needs to know that they can never do this again. So it's not about broadcasting or, it's not about, making things more fair. That justice and fairness thing needs to be differentiated from. I think ones are much more concerned with fairness. And if everybody was equal and if everybody did the right thing and if everybody followed the rules the same, 8s are not about everybody following the rules. They're about people staying in their lane. And they don't want people crossing over the lane into their lane and thinking they can get away with it. And so 8s are not, proactive about the rules. They're reactive about the rules. And so somebody got the better of me, it's not going to happen again. And vengeance needs to be taken on that person. This could probably be illustrated in a lot of ways, I don't have time to do all that. But okay, so less aware 8s could maybe steamroll people. That is just kind of not listen to them, not pay attention to them, and sort of push people in the direction that the 8 wants to go. Remember, the animal for the 8 is the bull, right? And so the bull just acts like a bull. They just push and move, and they use their power to just force, like a blunt force instrument, to just compel people to do their will. But again, this is unhealthy, all right? So don't hear this and be like, wow, how terrible we are. This is, all of us when we're unhealthy are terrible, okay? Our unhealth of every type is vile. And every type can look horrible, when they're operating in their unhealth, under stress, So for the 8, they can sometimes confuse, their truth with objective truth. And since they know they're right and they know you're wrong, well then, in their mind, like all of the universe agrees with them. They might have a hard time seeing that this is their truth or their perspective or their way of looking at the world. And it may not be the universal truth, of the way things actually are. They were upset and offended, and so, you need to pay. Okay. They may, feign like they're open to honest dialogue, but their actions might reveal that they're not really open to any kind of honest communication. They will be untrusting of you under stress. They have a very hard time trusting people because if I let you into my fort, how do I know you won't betray that trust? And betrayal is a big issue for 8s. 8s feel that maybe more than any other type, that, that fear and hurt that comes from trusting in someone who turns against you. It's like the unpardonable sin to an 8. To reveal yourself to be a hostile after they've taken you in and, brought you into their fort. So it can be hard then for 8s under stress in their outhouse when they're anxious and worried and upset to be very trusting. They're going to be naturally untrusting of others, unable to share power with others, and operate from the belief that maybe nobody else could do this job. Everybody else just needs to step out of the way, and if anything's going to get done, it's going to get done because I get it done. They're going to maybe adopt that kind of thinking, that everybody just needs to shut up. Everybody just needs to get out of the way. You people don't know what you're doing, and let me at it. And you know what, Bob? I'm tired of hearing your mouth. So you step out, step away, back up. You're fired. If they have the power to fire, you're fired. Pack your stuff and get out of here. And I've got to just take ownership and responsibility. I don't know why I ever thought I could trust you all to do anything. You've showed yourself to me, and shame on me for believing in you. That's probably what it's going to be, probably a lot more violent than that, a lot more loud and, hurtful, and probably a few swear words in there. If I'm honest, eights, that's part of their natural language. Swear words, are like verbal assaults. That's why we use them. We use them think of them as verbal punches, okay, to push others or to punch others or to push them back or to shock them back. And in their communication style and their unhealth, eights are probably going to use, vulgar language or swear words to get their point across, to help you understand the intensity. And that's a link to lust. Lust and intensity go together, to help you to see the intensity with which they feel what they feel. Another way to define lust is intensity. A desire for all things to be intense. Okay, so they're going to use intense words. All right, and sometimes their anger could be excessive, unexamined as to whether it's appropriate, or whether this is the appropriate place or persons to hear this anger. And they're going to probably take actions impulsively without thinking about the consequences. In other words, they may get themselves in over their head. Okay. So what does that have to do with going to 5? Because, fives, aren't they quiet, keep to themselves, introverts? Well, sometimes. But I think going to 5, what that means is you will see 8s after they've lost it, okay? If they've lost it verbally. They might lose it, but then just shut it all down for fear of losing their job or fear of losing connections. But even after they've lost it, what you'll see often, I almost want to say invariably, but often what you'll see is 8s then retreat and withdraw like a 5, okay? There will be this point when 8s get overwhelmed if they feel like they can't win or their intensity is not getting for them what they hoped it would get for them, and they feel like they're backed into a corner or backed up against a wall, or it's just not working for them. There'll be this moment where they will say, one way or another, "Peace out, I'm leaving." Although it probably won't be peace out. That's the nice way of saying it. They might say something else, probably will say something else, but they will grab their stuff and they will leave and they will withdraw. And in this time of withdrawing, they will maybe be reassessing their arguments, or retreating to strategize. You might also see them go into an investigative mode in their anger. They may start pointing the finger at you and say, "You were supposed to be here at work at 8 o'clock. We've all been waiting for you. Where have you been?" Now, think about that. I mean, a 9 or a 7 or a 6, it's probably not going to come across that direct and harsh. They might say, "Hey, I thought we were supposed to meet at 8 o'clock. Person says, "Oh yeah, that's right. Well, I had some things come up, so I was about 20 minutes late. I'm really sorry." "Oh, it's okay. Well, we started working ahead of you. I hope that's all right." And they work, to try to, they might express a little frustration, but compare that with what I think the 8's going to be inclined to do is, we said we'd be here at 8 o'clock. Where were you? When you say you're going to be somewhere, we expect you to be there. All of us, I called your phone and you didn't answer. And then I called your roommate and they said they didn't know where you were. And you might see them go into that investigative, like a 5, investigative observing mode, but it's kind of with their finger at your chest, poking like this. You're going to see them, when they get overwhelmed, withdraw, re-strategize, recollect themselves, reorganize their arguments, or kind of another way of saying it is reload. They've shot all the magazine at you, and now they're going off in private and they're reloading, in a sense, getting ready for the next interaction with you. When 8s are under stress, they may become, emotionally distant or emotionally cold. Okay, 5s are emotionally distant by nature and emotionally cold, emotionally disconnected. Go look up anywhere, what it means to be a 5, and what you'll see is part of it is emotionally detached. Well, when an 8 is under stress and angry and upset and frustrated with you, they're emotionally charged with anger, but they might kind of forget that they love you, they care about you. You're their husband or their wife or their child or their parent or their brother or sister or their best friend. And they can kind of like maybe suspend all of that. And you think, wow, this person, hates me. Because they could become, at that moment, emotionally disconnected in their anger and in their frustration and in their, just intolerance of your behavior. So they could clam up, they could withdraw like a 5, they could isolate themselves away like a 5, they could become more emotionally cold and distant from you like a 5. They could become less expressive. That's probably after you get the outburst. They may just say, I just don't have anything to say to you, and become less expressive with you like a 5. Retreat and strategize. What do 5s do? Strategize, how to conquer the world in their basements, and even show a lack of self-care. Again, look up anywhere what it means to be a 5, and what you'll see is 5s can get so focused on the information that is at hand and what they're researching that they can forget to just take care of themselves, to just do the simple things like hygiene and brush their teeth and, eat good meals. They'll just live on ramen noodles and pizza in the basement while they're doing research or playing video games or whatever, has caught their attention or whatever they're into. And in the same way, when 8s are upset, angry, frustrated, and intense and living in that outhouse, they may just kind of forget to even care about themselves in terms of like their emotional health and relaxing and calming down and being present to life, and they may become more measured and calculated like 5s. So if any of this rings true with you and you're an 8, then I want you to realize how often you go to the outhouse and maybe how long you stay there. And just realize that that outhouse of 5 for you, that's not your home. That's not where you're supposed to belong. That's not where you're supposed to take up residence. You're not supposed to be spending the night there, so to speak. So if that's where you're at a lot of the time, those attitudes, actions, behaviors describe you as an 8, then realize you may need to start working on becoming more healthy. And you can take steps right now to calm down. And the first step is really just observing that truth that, wow, I'm not been as healthy as I need to be, and I've allowed myself to kind of become very unhealthy. That is just huge right there, just observing where you're at, to just know, whoa, I'm in the outhouse. And guess what? When you're in the outhouse, nobody wants to be around you. Nobody wants to be with you. Nobody wants to be your friend. Nobody wants to visit you. Nobody wants to come and listen to you or sing songs with you. When you're in an outhouse, that's where you go to be alone. That's where you go in privacy. And you need to go there at times to relieve yourself, but don't take up residence there. So start making steps back to health. And you can do this. You can take action to start moving back toward health by observing, by not being so critical and harsh on yourself, not being so critical and harsh on others, relaxing, and just saying, okay, this is where I am and I don't want to live here. I don't want to stay in this attitude all the time. Okay, so what does it look like when 8s go to the top of the hill, to Enneagram type 2, in their health? Well, when 8s are healthy and they're doing really well and they feel confident and they feel cared for and they feel protected and they feel safe, when they feel safe, guess what? They can be more vulnerable. which I know is probably a disgusting thought for most 8s. But on the high side of 8, they can be very motivational and very inspirational to others because they make other people feel safe. 8s, it's in their nature to provide a sense of protective safety with them wherever they go. And so as they take leadership and they take responsibility and they step forward and they protect others, other people will then feel more emboldened. And that's one of the huge things that 8s do for other types, is they help you get in touch with your own courage. They embolden you. They empower you. Now, again, when 8s are upset, they will disempower you, right? So they will do to you the opposite of what they do for you in their strength. In their strength, they will help you get in touch with your own sense of courage and power and ability, and help you tap into strength to make decisions that otherwise you might have been putting off. You know, you'll tell them about your job and how much you hate it and how frustrating it is. And the 8, their way of counseling you or supporting you is to say, look, this is on you. If you don't like your job, then you need to take action. You need to go in there and you need to straighten it out. You need to decide what you want to do. And I wouldn't take this garbage, and you need to just shove it back at them and say, this is, and so, the next day, the friends of the 8 go and quit their jobs because they were emboldened to do what maybe they were too timid to do on their own. And 8 will do that. They'll disempower you when they're angry at you or when they're threatened, and they will empower you when they are when they're feeling secure and safe. And that's one of the great things about having an 8 around you in your life, is they will just help you get in touch with that courage that sometimes you go to sleep to. Self-aware 8 leaders understand that sometimes their boldness could intimidate others. And so they restrain themselves. They withhold. In other words, what the Bible word for this would be meek. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Meekness and weakness are not the same thing. Weakness means you can't show up. You don't have it in you to stand up for yourself. Meekness says, this isn't a fight I'm going to get in. I could get in this fight and I could stop this right now. But I'm going to withhold my words, withhold my energy, and withhold my strength because it serves a greater purpose to do so. Meekness is restrained power. And when an 8 is healthy, they restrain those words, they restrain those comments, they restrain that action, they restrain that power, because they recognize that doing so will help further the ultimate outcomes. And 8s are really good at being big picture people. And so when the 8 realizes that the big picture is the success of the group and not, and so maybe I just need to withhold some of my natural tendencies. And so the 8 always has like that challenge that Superman has. If you read any of the Superman comics or, get into him at all, Superman, what you'll find is he has too much power. I mean, he can laser eyes, cold breath, fly, see through X-ray vision. I mean, it's ridiculous. Everything a superhero can do, Superman can do it. He can literally spin around the globe and reverse time. And it gets kind of ridiculous. I think when they were writing the comics, they just kept adding all these powers until it became, almost nonsense. And an 8 is kind of like Superman in that it's not about being empowered. It's about knowing when to restrain your power. That's the real challenge for the 8, is knowing when to let yourself be that bold, powerful self, but then also knowing when now is not the time, now is not the appropriate moment. I need to think before I act. And that's huge for 8s, to just learn to think. If you could learn one word maybe to apply to your journey as an 8, learn the word pause. Pause. Okay? Not stop. I'm not telling you to stop. I'm telling you to pause. Before you say yes, before you take ownership, before you move into action, before you tell grandma what grandma needs to hear that nobody else will tell her, before you say those words, just hit pause for a second. Hit the pause button and think about it for a minute. Count to 10, and just think about what you're about to say. Think about what you're about to do and the effect that it might have, positive and negative. That pause button could mean the difference between you getting in over your head or pushing all the people you love and care about away from you. Okay, so let's see. 8s moderate themselves. 8s understand that they, have a tendency to be powerful, so they get in touch with their humanness. Here it comes again, that word you hate, that vulnerability. The inner child gets to come out and play. They get in touch with their tender side. That part of themselves that they've been shutting down gets to come out. The tender side, the soft side, however you want to say it, the weak side, the human side. So what does that have to do with 2? Well, 2s are givers, right? 2s are caregivers. 2s are connectors. 2s are pleasers. They want to come alongside of you and make it about you and support you. When 8s are healthy, they become softer. They become more giving of their time, attention, kind words, generous actions, attention, their listening skills. All of this, they become more giving. And think the opposite of lust is everything exists for my use. You exist for my use. So the opposite of that, I'm here for you. I'm here to meet your needs. I'm here to care about you. So they start to say, maybe my beliefs aren't the only ones that are right, and maybe I need to value other people and value other people's beliefs and try to connect with them. Sees others as equals. Okay, the 2, focuses all of the attention on others in a bid to receive their love and their, I get it. We'll talk about 2s on 2s, but for an 8 right now, it's just focusing the spotlight on others, their wants, their desires, and giving some, credence to those. Becoming tender, becoming more vulnerable, becoming more passionate and caring toward others and about others. Okay, so I hope this has been helpful to you. I hope it's been encouraging to you. As I say in all the videos, be present to life. And for the 8, that might mean something like not everything's a fight. Not everything is a problem to be solved. Not everything is a challenge to be overcome. Not everything is a threat that you need to be against or need to protect yourself from. And knowing to distinguish, what is a threat and what is an opportunity, it can be a real challenging thing. To love people deeply, to love them from the heart, to let people see the inner sweetness and the inner goodness in your heart, to let your walls, think about it like this. Maybe not say let your walls come down, that's too much. But let the gate open. Let the drawbridge open and let people in, and let yourself come out and let people know you for who you are. And remember, it's not your strength that everybody loves. That may be why they were first attracted to you, but it's that heart. It's that heart you have. It's that love that you have, is what makes people love you. And remember, fearing you and loving you isn't the same thing, right? Okay, so thank you guys. Blessings. I'll see you next time. Oh, by the way, in the description, if you want to reach out, I know probably you 8s won't, but maybe you know somebody that needs help. In my description, you can get in touch with me if you want to. I appreciate your comments. Thank you guys. See you next time.